So, the latest report from the International Energy Agency just dropped, and boy, is it a mixed bag. It paints this really fascinating, kind of complicated picture of the global race to clean energy. On one hand, we're seeing growth on a scale we have literally never seen before. But at the same time, some pretty serious new problems are popping up. So the big question is, how are we really doing?
Okay, first, let's just remind ourselves of the goal, the big one. At the COP28 Climate Summit, almost 200 countries made this historic pledge to triple the world's renewable energy capacity by 2030. That's the target. That's our North Star.
But here comes the reality check. According to the IEA's latest forecast, where we're actually headed is a 2.6 times increase. Now, don't get me wrong, that is a massive, historic expansion. It's the fastest we've ever grown. But it's not tripling. It falls short. And that little gap, the one between 2.6 and 3.0, well, that's really the heart of the story we're unpacking today.
All right, so here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll kick things off with the incredible story of solar's growth, the good news. Then we'll get into the new headwinds and policy changes that are starting to slow things down. After that, we'll look at the growing pains our electricity grids are starting to feel. And finally, we'll explore what it would actually take to close that gap and get back on track for the tripling goal.
Okay, let's jump right in, because the good news here is genuinely stunning. We are right in the middle of a renewables boom like nothing we've ever seen before.
And the undisputed star of this show? Solar PV. It's just unstoppable. Its capacity is set to more than double in just the next 5 years. Why? Well, mostly because it's cheap, and it's way faster to get permits for. China is still the giant in the room, making up nearly 60% of all the new stuff being built. And get this, they're on track to hit their 2035 target a full 5 years early. India is also smashing installation records. And you know, it's not just solar. Geothermal energy is also projected to triple its growth by 2030. The momentum is just huge.
But here's where it gets weird. There's a paradox right at the heart of this boom. Even with all these installations going up, the companies that are actually making the solar panels and wind turbines, they're struggling badly. In China, there's such a massive oversupply of solar panels that prices have crashed by over 60%, leading to billions in losses. At the same time, wind manufacturers outside of China are also losing billions, thanks to rising costs and supply chain nightmares. So it's a really tough business to be in right now, which is kind of wild.
And that kind of brings us to the other side of the story, because for the first time ever, the IEA has actually lowered its 5-year growth forecast. And that's because some really serious headwinds are starting to blow. And you can see why they downgraded the forecast when you look at these numbers. The global forecast is down about 5%. But look at the United States. That is the real story here. The IEA has slashed its growth forecast for the US by almost 50%. 50! That one revision, right there, is pretty much the main reason the entire global forecast got pulled down. So you might be asking, what on earth could cause such a massive revision? Well, the report points the finger directly at a series of specific policy changes. Things like getting rid of key tax credits sooner than expected, and new restrictions on wind and solar projects. So this isn't some small market adjustment. It's a fundamental policy shift that's changing the whole outlook.
If we break it down a bit more, you can see 3 things really causing the slowdown. In the US, it's policies that are speeding up the end of crucial tax credits. In China, they're moving away from guaranteed prices to more competitive auctions, which is squeezing the profits for new projects. And then there's offshore wind, which is in a really tough spot globally. Its forecast got cut by over a quarter because of project cancellations and just soaring costs.
And that brings us to the next big challenge. Because the problems aren't just about policy and finance anymore, they're becoming physical. We're building solar and wind farms faster than ever before, but our actual electricity grids, well, they're really struggling to keep up.
A key symptom of all this strain is something called curtailment. Basically, this is when you have a perfectly good wind or solar farm that's ready to generate power, but it has to be shut down. Why? Because the grid is too jammed up, or there just isn't enough demand for the power right then and there. It's literally wasted clean energy. And believe me, this is not some small fringe issue. Just look at these numbers from 2024. In Chile, over 17% of available solar power just had to be thrown away, curtailed. In Germany, almost a fifth of all potential power from offshore wind was just lost. These are huge figures that tell you the system is really feeling the pressure.
And what's the other big symptom? Something truly wild. A big increase in the number of hours with negative electricity prices.
Yep, you heard that right. Prices actually fall below zero. This happens when it's super sunny or windy, and there's so much power flooding the grid that producers literally have to pay people to take it off their hands. It's a flashing red light that supply and demand are way, way out of sync.
So here we are. We've got this incredible growth engine, but it's running into policy headwinds and hitting these physical infrastructure walls. We know the goal is triple capacity. We know the forecast is 2.6 times. So the big question is, how in the world do we bridge that gap?
Well, the good news is the IEA says it's still possible. They've actually mapped out what they call an accelerated case, and it shows that with the right moves, we could hit 2.8 times growth by 2030. That would get us almost all the way to that tripling target. So the path is there, if governments decide they want to take it.
So what does that path actually look like? Well, the IEA lays out 5 critical actions. First, governments have got to create stable, predictable policies so investors feel confident. Next, they have to slash all the red tape and the crazy long waiting times for project permits. Third, and this one is huge, we need massive investment to modernize and expand our electricity grids. We also need more flexibility in the system, things like big batteries to soak up extra power. And finally, making it easier and safer to finance projects in emerging economies is absolutely key to unlocking all that global potential.
Which really leaves us with this final thought. The technology is here. It works. And it's being rolled out at a pace we have never, ever seen. That momentum is real. But the central question this whole IEA report leaves us with is this. Can our policies, our financial systems, and our physical infrastructure evolve fast enough to actually meet this moment? The race is on.